Well, welcome to another edition of the Has Been podcast. We're coming to you from San Jose, California, as the Purdue men get ready to play Texas in the Sweet 16 on Thursday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time for that game. I'm in San Jose helping goldenblock.com cover the festivities, and we'll talk about Purdue's game coming up, recap what happened in St. Louis, and also some women's basketball news, where things are at in the with the program as we head into the final weeks before the portal opens. But with the men, they got through St. Louis, no problem, very little problems with Queens. It was tight early, but the main thing out of the Queens game was that Braden Smith set the career record for assist, beating Bobby Hurley's mark, which had stood for 33 years. And it was quite an accomplishment for Braden because as we got toward the end of the year, I really didn't think that he would get to it as quickly as he did. Obviously, the 4 games in the Big Ten tournament helped. It also helped that he had a gob of assists, 16 in one game. Um, but I didn't think that he would. I mean, he was kind of on pace, but the way the season ended for Purdue, you didn't know how many games they're going to play in the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament. Uh, but they got really the maximum games in the Big Ten tournament. They've played 2 in the NCAA, where he got himself in a position of just needing 2 assists to break the record, and he did that in the first 10 minutes of that game against Queens, and everybody knew it. They were following along, and nice ovation from the Purdue crowd, but also a nice ovation from um, everybody in the building, uh, recognizing his accomplishment. And, the assist record is one of those things where you need some help. You need guys to hit shots. And over the course of his 4 years, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Zach Edey, um, David Jenkins, Lance Jones. I mean, just the list goes on and on of the guys that have stepped up and hit shots for Braden to get that record. So, it's one of those where you can go get all the rebounds you want. You can go get steals. You can, um, points. It's kind of all on you. But with assists, you need somebody to hit those baskets. And not only Braden got the ball in the right spots, but Matt Painter did a good job of surrounding him with scorers and shooters for him to accumulate as many of assists as he has. And you know, Hurley's record stood for 33 years. How long will this one stand? A lot of it depends um, how long players stay at one school. Uh, um, and you don't have to stay at one school to set that record. You could do it at multiple schools, but the fact that Braden did stay at one school and set the record, I think, should carry a lot of weight. Hurley was at one school and did it, and most records of that caliber, guys have stayed at one school. Excuse me, and it's late. It's late my time, not late California time, but it's late. Um, but most guys, stay at one school and get those records, and you kind of hope that. One thing I wouldn't want to see is a guy break his record, but had played at 4 different schools in 4 years. I I think you need an asterisk with that. But the job now is to win games for Purdue, but also stretch that record out to a point where it's going to be very difficult to get that record. Excuse me again. I need a nap. Uh, anyway, that was a big moment. And then Purdue played Miami. Um, Very athletic team, but um, a team that was prone to mistakes. And Purdue's pretty disciplined. Um, and Miami made enough mistakes that Purdue was able to take advantage of. And Braden didn't have a great game. There's no question about that. 8 turnovers, 8 assists. Hit free throws down the stretch, which were important, but Trey Kaufman ran and Fletcher Lawyer and CJ Cox got Purdue to the point where they were ahead, and they were able to put that game away, even though CJ Cox hyperextended his knee um, in that game in the second half, did not return, came to the bench. Um, Now today is Wednesday. He did practice today at in San Jose um, at the SAP Center or the Shark Tank because it's the home of the San Jose Sharks, also home of the 1999 Purdue Women's Basketball National Championship that was played in this same arena 27 years ago. The place has changed. They've changed the carpet, they've changed the drapes, they've brought in new furniture, but it's still the same arena when you get right down to it. And I, it looks the same as it did 27 years ago. But that was a crowning achievement for the program, but also the university at that point too, to have uh, see that team win that national championship out here in San Jose. But I digress. So CJ did practice today. He didn't seem to be. You were only allowed 15 minutes at the regional level to watch practice. What he did after the media left, no idea for sure. I'd be curious if he shows up on the injury report or the availability report on Friday, which under the Big Ten, those come out 3 hours before the game. I don't know what the rules are with the NCAA, but word will get out what his status will be. I would imagine if there's any status um, to his name, it'll be questionable, and they may take it all the way up to game time. The guess is that if he doesn't start and doesn't play, Jakari Harris will get those minutes, and Jakari is more than capable of handling that role. He's shown it throughout the year, and he'll continue to show it. This is really a bad look for me. He'll continue to show it. I don't, you know, they've, he's been in enough situations that there should not be a drop off. The question then, who would fill in for Jakari coming off the bench? And you got multiple options there. You got Omer Meyer. Jack Bunner could play that position, even though he's been playing the four most of the time. So you have other options, um, and I think they work that out. They would I think they would miss CJ because he's been a steady performer. Doesn't turn the ball over very much, if at all. Uh, the thing about Cox and Harris is that they both shoot the three ball better away from Mackey Arena than they do actually in Mackey Arena, which I find very strange because usually you're better at your home court, your familiar surroundings. But in Harris's case, he's like 7 of 36 at home from 3-point range. Well, on the road, he's well over 45%, 46% probably. And, CJ is the same thing. He's well over 40% on the road and under 40% at home. It's just one of those odd things. You would think you'd shoot better at home than you would on the road, but also shooting well on the road or away from Mackey Arena, which would be neutral court settings. Um, you would have to think that gives them confidence, especially this time of year when all you're playing is neutral court games away from home, that you feel confident you're gonna shoot the ball well in these new environments. And they've done that. I mean, CJ hit those three threes against Miami, had 11 points before he went down with the knee injury. And I'll contend that those three threes, kind of saved Purdue. Um, they didn't have to play uphill as much in the second half because they were down 7 at the time. And if Miami gets that lead out to 10 in the final 2 minutes, you know, Purdue's confident enough. Purdue, knows its abilities, knows what it can do, but you don't want to be facing a 10-point hole in an NCAA tournament game. Um, and even though they were down by two, you felt like they had won the first half based on how it finished, based on how CJ hit those three shots. And and I think that kind of propelled him into the second half. And even when he went out of the game, they still maintained um, the lead. Jakari Harris was big on defense. He stepped up and hit a three. And this is where your depth really pays off. But you had Drake Hoffman ran down low, battling um, some really physical guys, and sitting courtside, you could feel the physicality of that game. You really could. Miami had a bunch of athletes. They were jumping all over the place, but um, the one thing where Purdue took advantage is when they got the ball inside, they really didn't look to pass. And when they got the ball in the paint, they didn't look to pass. And Purdue was able to kind of um, stymie their offense that way. Purdue only took 47 shots in that game. Um, they were very efficient. Fletcher Loyer was tremendous in that game. Um, 7 field goal attempts, 24 points, 4 for 4 from 3-point range will do that. 8 for 8 from the line will do that. But still, if you go back to the first game of the year against Evansville, he had 30 points on um, maybe 11 field goal attempts. Um, I mean, the efficiency was off the roof, and it was the same way against um, Miami. And Drake Offenren was a beast down low. Um, his floater was working. Fletcher was hitting from the perimeter. Uh, Braden again didn't have his best game, but you know, CJ had stepped up and filled a role there. Oscar Clough did a nice job. So they pulled together, and now they get to play Texas, and a former Boilermaker, Cam Heide, on Texas's team. If you remember, he hit a crucial three-pointer for Texas to beat Gonzaga, stretch out the lead. It was a 1-point game, and then it became a 4-point game. And Cam had some big shots at Purdue, big plays at Purdue, a couple. The dunk against UConn off of Zach Edey miss in the national championship game. And then he had a big three last year that tied the game against Houston in the Sweet 16. So it's nothing new for him. And he's been a starter for Texas. I sit here and say he knows Purdue's plays. I don't know if he actually knows the plays. He knows the system. But when you have guys like this that have played on the team and then you play them, within a year, um, he knows personnel. He knows strengths and weaknesses of these players. But you can know all that all you want, but you still got to stop it. You still have to, um, devise a plan to do that. You can get so hung up on that all of a sudden you forget about stuff. But I'm sure he's been helpful to the coaches and what they were trying to glean, things you don't see in a stat sheet, things you maybe don't pick up on film as far as, you know, when we practiced, here's how we dealt with Braden Smith, or here's how we shaded Fletcher Loyer, or here's how we defended Trey Kaufman. I mean, it's just any little bits of information that Heidi provided the coaching staff, they absorb the information and then figure out uh, what they want to do with it. But I don't think much will change from a scouting perspective. I think Texas will do uh, what it what it feels is the best, and usually with Purdue, that's trying to get the ball out of Braden's hands. He has not shot the ball well. He didn't shoot the ball well on Sunday against Miami. He shot the ball well against Queens. Now, if you want to just take that and say that's Queens, it doesn't count, but it does. It does count at the end of the day. But if you go back deeper into the Big Ten tournament, the first 3.5 games, he didn't shoot the ball well. It was only after he ripped his jersey and got number 41 that the shots started going in. And for the life of me, this is making a huge U-turn. The life of me, Purdue will not, or the NIL people at Purdue, the name, image, and likeness people at Purdue will not provide anybody in the athletic department with how many number 41 jerseys they've sold. Okay. I mean, Purdue people they're buying them. I mean, they just are, but they won't provide the numbers to um, to Purdue. I mean, this is silly. It's a positive story. You know, people will be interested. Well, how many 41 jerseys have they sold? Now there could be some licensing things that are going on. They're trying to work through, but it's just like one of these things where they're not compelled to do it. So they don't do it. And I've asked many times and don't get anywhere. Anyway, that's for another day. Because it's an interesting story. It really is. I don't know if you caught it or not, but Braden said that um, in the Big Ten tournament title game against Michigan, where he ripped his jersey, that um, it was sewn back together, and he could have put it back on in the second half, but he kept 41 because 41 had some shots that he was making. So that's what he did. To me, who's the guy that sewed it together, and where did he learn how to sew? I mean, these are questions that I would love to have answered, but sometimes that's not my lane, so I don't get into it. You stay in your lane. In my situation, when you're an old man, an old has been, you just kind of follow orders and move on. But I I really digressed now because the point was that Braden did struggle with his shooting in some Big Ten tournaments. So curious how Texas uh, plays that. Do they drop coverage and let him fire away from mid range, or do they do something different? Most teams have tried to do two things to Braden: get the ball out of his hands, and also put size on him. Michigan did that with Yaxel Lindenberg, and other teams have tried that. They usually double him or they put size on him, um, just to make it very difficult for him to see where he's going. Um, so Texas has a lot of options. I would imagine that they will probably drop in their coverage and let him fire away from 15 feet. But that's a chance you take because if he gets in a rhythm and he gets hot, he can carry the team from a shooting perspective. And there's other guys that can do that too. So Texas has his hands full with Purdue, but Purdue's going to have to play well to beat Texas. It's a team that has played 3 games in the tournament because they were in the play-in game. Purdue's played 2, so they have some momentum on their side. They are the underdog, and we'll see what happens on Thursday. And I really apologize for yawning, but there's really nothing I can do about it. Uh, so if it annoys you, I'm sorry, and maybe nobody's watching this, which is usually the case. Um, the numbers are not good. Maybe if I yawn more, the numbers will be better. But anyway, big game, and then if Purdue wins, then they'll face the winner of Arizona and Arkansas on Saturday, either 6 or 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, in the regional final, with the right to get to Indianapolis and play the Final Four. And what a moment that would be for the program to play um, at Lucas Oil in the Final Four. It take you back to 1980 when Purdue played at Market Square Arena in the Final Four. And then they had this thing called the third place game that they played, the consolation game of the Final Four. It might have been the last one, or the next year was the last one. They didn't stick around much after that. Can you imagine doing that today? Two teams sticking around 2 extra days to play a game that, yeah, we're number 3. Yeah, consolation games just don't carry any weight anymore. So yeah, I mean, a lot on the line for Purdue. A place, they got opportunity this weekend to get to a place that they thought they would be in at the beginning of the year. They've taken a different road. They've had a couple detours along the way, but now they're in a position to make that happen. But you got to get by Texas first. Uh, on the women's side, they've had 2 players go in the portal, Kendall Poirier and Lana McCarthy. No surprise there. Zero surprise there that they're both in. Purdue has already removed them from the website. They're not on the roster anymore, which tells you they're not coming back. you can go in the portal and come back. So it's not always set. But these two aren't coming back. Um, so in addition to trying to get a point guard, um, you know, Katie Gerald needs to get some more post players. Avery Gordon really would be the only true post player back. She didn't get a lot of minutes as a freshman. Still needs development work. Um, so there's a lot of holes that need to be filled, and you don't, who's next out of the portal, who's next going to go in the portal when it opens. Now the portal opens after the national championship game in April, um, and then there's a 2 week window there where you can get in. You don't have to decide where you're going, but if you're going to get in, if you're going to move, if you're going to transfer, then you have to be in the portal during this window. But you can decide later where you're going to go. Most people already know where they're going. A lot of backroom deals are already been made, and they're going to be made. Um, Now you just have to see if Purdue's going to be one of these programs that makes those deals before the actual portal opens. As I've written, I've mentioned, Katie Gerald has money to spend. I'm not going to say a lot, but she has money to spend from last year's revenue sharing, which the revenue sharing is part of the $20.5 million the schools are spending to pay their players. 75% of that money usually goes to football, 15% to basketball. These are rough estimates, give or take. Each school is different how they allocate that money, but those are the kind of the nation standards of how things are being done. Then you have 10% left over, and depending on your athletic department and your needs, at Purdue, women's basketball gets a slice of revenue share, volleyball gets a slice of revenue share, and then kind of everybody else. There's a pool of money there that's left over that they can fight over. They can come to the athletic department and say, "Hey, I need this guy. Here's how much I need," and then decisions are made. There's schools like Penn State hockey is big, wrestling is big, Iowa is big in wrestling. And then you go across the Big Ten, and everybody's got different strengths and weaknesses that they devote their money to. Um, but at Purdue, it's men's basketball, football, women's basketball, and volleyball. Those are the main four that are getting a slice of revenue share. Katie has money, and the money is first year. The money went from July 1st until June 30th, and once June 30th comes this year, the money that you have left over from this first cycle of revenue share must be spent. And because on July 1st of this year, the new round of revenue share will start. Now there's a 4% increase in the total amount. Does all that 4% increase go to football? Goes to men's basketball? Does women's basketball, volleyball get you know, a, a half of a percent of a raise, or I have no idea. But they're going to take care of football, and they're going to take care of men's basketball because those sports bring in all the revenue. Bottom line there. There's no other sport that brings in revenue. All the other sports lose money. Um, but anyway, she'll have a new. So I mean, in essence, you could use this time before June 30th as a signing bonus type of thing to try to get a player or two in here, and then you can kind of use the next round of money too to also pay them. But they need a playmaking three-level scorer point guard. That's been an issue. The void has been noticeable, and they're not going to go anywhere until you upgrade the talent on this roster. Bottom line. But it's a very difficult thing to do because they're not winning. They're not an attractive landing spot for anybody right now because they're not winning. You had to go the last day of the regular season to get in the Big Ten tournament. Unfortunately, they'll probably be in the same position next year. Um, so they've got to get people to answer their phones. Are you going to have to overpay somebody? Sure, you're going to have to. And you also need more than one. You just can't pay one player a lot of money and then hope everybody falls into place. Um, so they're in a very, very tough spot. Um, and trying to get other players to pick up the phone and when you call, um, or the agent to get involved, it's a big uphill climb right now for this program. Um, and you know, next year the non-conference schedule likely will be softer than this year. And it was pretty soft this year, but they stubbed their toe twice, and that cost them an opportunity to play in the postseason, even though they were um, they were invited to play in the WBIT, but I'm not sure they would have had any players available to play because McCarthy and Puryear were on their way out. Leighton Zay was hurt. Dolman never played or didn't play since November 30th. So you're really limited in the number of players you would have had available. And basically, um, Katie needed to focus on, since she was coming back, she needed to focus on, retooling this roster and getting it in a position to succeed. Now they will have a coaching change. Um, you know, Mark Stevens is no longer an assistant with the program. So she's going to have to fill that vacancy. Don't know for sure if there'll be another assistant coaching change. You would think, you know, this deep into it now after the season that word would get out that another one would make a change or somebody would leave. You don't know. So, Katie's got to find players and she's got to find an assistant coach. Um, and they need to find someone that can really up their game in the recruiting world. And specifically right now, because right now Katie's even though her contract runs through 2029, she's on a year-to-year basis. And everything they do right now has to be geared toward them winning this next season. If you flip those two non-conference games they lost to Purdue Fort Wayne and Central Michigan, and you don't lose to Penn State at home, which you shouldn't have, you're 16 and 14 and you're playing in the WBIT. Those three games, and whatever else happened in the season happened, if the same thing happens. But if you win those three games, you're 16 and 14. That's why it was paramount that they do well in the non-conference last year. They played Kentucky and were going to get beat, and they did. But every other game they needed to win, and they did. But those two games cost them an opportunity to play in the postseason. And then they could tout that they made tangible progress, that they were, in a postseason tournament, and not NCAA, but they were still in a postseason tournament, and they finished up for 500. Instead, you're saddled with a third straight losing season, which is the first time in 40 years. Uh, you're saddled with no postseason play. Um, Now you're losing players in the portal. They're probably going to lose some more. Taylor Feldman, who only played 7 games this year, had a back injury in the off season, and she had a legitimate back injury, and they shut her down after 7 games because that was kind of the threshold um, to get a red shirt. So they'll probably apply for her to get a medical red shirt, but I'm not sure she's going to be here. Um, but I do think Purdue needs to upgrade that position. We saw glimpses of her and she's a fine player, but I'm not sure Purdue's record is much different, if she's healthy and plays the whole year. She did some good things when she was in there, but she's a smaller um, point guard who I feared would get maybe battered around in the Big Ten, especially against the elite teams. But maybe she would have helped them beat Penn State. Maybe she would have helped them beat Purdue Fort Wayne. Maybe she would have helped them beat Central Michigan if she was healthy and 100% and all that. Don't know. What I do know is that they still get beat by Michigan. They still get beat by UCLA. They still get beat by USC. They still get beat by Maryland. Yeah, I think you get the picture there. she wasn't that much of a difference maker. But I think it's unclear whether she comes back or not. And and you have a couple others that would be question marks to come back. Kiki Smith and Tara Day would be two that might look to better their situation financially. Um, and and that's the cold reality of this situation. You don't need a reason to transfer. You can just say I'm transferring and put your name in the portal and go from there. Um, and that's the landscape we have now. Um, but this program is not going to get off the ground by churning over turning over the roster every single year and with portals. There's no high school recruiting going on. Well, it's probably going on, but it's not going on at a level where you're getting um, commitments, you're getting players. I can't remember the last time they had a visit from a high school player. It had been in the fall. There were a couple players. One was a 2027, but they had brought in a player from Florida who ended up going to Penn State, and but that may be the last one they had in from a high school standpoint, a recruitable athlete in the 26 class because they have three international kids that they're signing. Um, and maybe they can uh, they can be a difference maker. And we saw Ela Karsh this year got off to a good start, but then kind of quickly faded and then really struggled toward the end. You know, she got back on track in the last game, but it was too late. There was a lot of promise there at the beginning, but it just didn't materialize and work out. Now she needs to take steps to improve, um, and that's just the bottom line. These players have to improve. Part of it is on the coaching staff, but I think a bigger part's on the players to commit to getting better. How many times a week are you in the gym by yourself? Or are you dragging teammates in there to play pickup? You know, the men's team plays pickup. They play pickup games against each other. Um, their graduate assistants get out there and play. They play pickup games, I think, at Legacy out in Lafayette. You never hear about that with the women's team. No one's dragging them into Mackey Arena or the Cardinal Court and playing, an hour of pickup ball. Um, you don't hear about it, and even the people that work at Mackey Arena, they bring it up because they don't see it because they see the men doing it, but they don't see the women doing it, and then they see the product on the floor and wonder why they're not doing it. That all that has to be that's player led. That's not coach led. That's player led. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that the coaches aren't encouraging it or encourage their graduate assistants to do it, but most of the time that's player led, and that's a sign of a good program, a sign of leadership, and a sign of people that care and want to get better. Right now the women's team just doesn't have that, and they're going to be stuck in this situation until that mindset changes and other things changes for them to be better. Because the fear is that they're going to be back in the same position next year going into the last week of the regular season or the last day of the regular season, needing a win to get in the Big Ten tournament. Because Northwestern has changed coaches now. Carla Perubi from Princeton is the new Northwestern coach. Rutgers has changed coaches. Gary Redis, who's assistant at LSU, is the new coach. Penn State has changed coaches. Former player Tanisha Wright with the Lady Lions is their new head coach. She had been in the WNBA. So the three of the four teams that Purdue is in contention with at the bottom of the league have changed coaches. So just based on that, they're going to be better. You're going to get a new attitude. You're going to get a new approach, a new way of looking at things. And usually when you have new coaches, you get new resources. And I would expect those programs to have improved resources. Um, so Purdue, in theory, is already behind these three teams. Wisconsin did not change coaches, but their coach is now in their second year. They benefited from an early Big Ten schedule that got them into the Big Ten tournament, um, and they got in the WBIT. So in theory, they're getting better because they're playing games and they're practicing, where Purdue's not doing anything. So in some way, Purdue is behind these other teams. And how do they catch up? A lot of it's going to be based on what they do in the portal. Um, and again, you can't do this every year and be successful. I just don't think, now Maryland does it at a level, but they're getting high level players. Purdue is not getting high level players. And, they've got to figure out a way to inject this program with more talent, either through the high school ranks, through the portal, or just developing players. Because, this is, you're about to go through the same thing again, as of right now. Now, things can change. A couple players can make a big difference, but they got to be the right players. And you need scoring, they need rebounding now. They need a lot of help. Um, so we'll see how the offseason plays out. Long way to go. We'll see how things come together. Um, but anyway, other than that, and I don't know if you saw, but former Purdue coach Christy Curry left Alabama to go be the head coach at University of South Florida, SEC school to American Conference, I believe. But you're going from a Power Four to a mid-major. Why would she do that? Why would she do that? Her name was also mentioned at Northwestern, which I never thought was a possibility because, number one, the Currys don't like the cold, and they're not going to Northwestern. And they can't recruit the kind of player that they want to recruit at Northwestern. You're kind of pigeonholed a little bit on who you can recruit. But why would they make that move and leave an Alabama program that, in theory, would have resources? But they didn't. The women's program didn't have revenue share, had very minimal revenue share. Didn't have any NIL. At Alabama, it's football, 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 then men's basketball. Then they got lumped in with like volleyball and gymnastics and other programs where you're sharing, maybe a couple $100,000 or $300,000, and it's hard enough to compete in the SEC, but when you're at a disadvantage like that, why bang your head up against Texas and South Carolina every year? Go to the American. Um, and Christy got a pay raise. She got substantial revenue sharing. Uh, got a good salary base for her assistants. They're making an investment in that program, and you can get in the NCAA tournament through the American. You can make a run in the NCAA tournament. Um, you can do some good things, and they can recruit the kind of players that they're used to recruiting. And I think it's a good move. I mean, she's toward the end of her career. Um, Tampa's not a bad place to hang it up. Um, and I think it's a really good move for her. It's a good move for the school. They get an experienced coach that's won over 500 games. You know, she's the last coach that led Purdue to a Big Ten regular season title, and that was in 2002. You can do the math. It's 2026. Their last Big Ten regular season championship was 2002. And I mean, even if the program would rebound right now, they're not close to doing that, not with UCLA and, USC getting Juju Watkins back and Michigan where it's at. And you go right down the list. Iowa, Purdue's not close to that right now. And I don't think that's the expectation. The expectation for this program as of right now, and you try to deal in reality. Reality is they need to figure out a way to get to the middle and then go from there. But right now they're having a hard time getting out of the basement into the middle. So it's a good move for the Currys. Happy for them. They'll do well. Um, And, transfers like to play in the warm weather, like to be in the sunshine and, the middle of Florida, which Tampa's in the middle, but it's called South Florida. So I don't understand that. But there'll be a landing spot for transfers for them the way that she can recruit. So good deal for them. Um, but on Purdue's front, we'll see how the rest of the offseason plays out. They need some help. They need some talent. Um, and we'll see what kind of roster they end up with. Anyway, well, thanks for stopping by. Haven't done this in a while. It's been a couple weeks. Apologize for that, or maybe I shouldn't apologize for it because it's not any good. But anyway, maybe we'll do something after the Thursday game and recap what happens and look ahead to the Elite Eight if Purdue's there or the season wrap up. Because if the men's season ends this weekend, it's going to be a disappointment because preseason number one in the country and expectation uh, was to get to the Final Four and play for the national championship. So anything short of that is going to be viewed as a bit of a disappointment. But they have straightened themselves out a little bit, but they got a lot more work to do. All right. Well, thanks for stopping by, and we will um, talk to you later.